Steve Sabludowski. I'm publisher of BayouBuzz.com. And today we're going to be talking about yesterday, which was January 6th. Today, of course, is January 7th. And I'm here with Jim Brown. Jim is an author, publisher. He's got 28 years of experience in the state government as Secretary of State, Insurance Commissioner, and State Senator. Did I leave anything out, Jim?
No, you've covered the gamut, Steve, which means I'm an expert in very little. You cover the gamut, but I'm looking forward to kind of giving some perspectives over what happened on the national level, how it affects us on a state level. It was an interesting day yesterday, full of contradictions that I'll look forward to talking with you about.
Okay, so let me just say this: that those people who are watching, please go ahead and share with others. Also, you can chat with us. You can just type in, and I'll get it, and it'll appear on the screen, assuming that it's legible and understandable. And so, please go ahead and share with others, and please go ahead and like this, and let's hear your comments about yesterday. Love to hear it. Really would love to hear your comments. So let's first start off and just Jim, your overall impression of yesterday.
Well, it was kind of interesting contradictions you can read into it, no matter which side you happen to be on. We have recognitions of a number of events that took place in our country's history. Obviously, 9/11 is at the top of the list. So many tragedies that we acknowledge as we move forward. But what happened yesterday, Steve, is a reflection of what's happening in this country today, the divisions that took place. This should have been a solemn gathering to join together and say, look, for whatever reason, this thing got out of hand. The world saw us in a conflict, an attack on our nation's capital. 5 people killed, many injured. Putting up a hangman's noose to say, let's get the vice president, who's a Republican, was a Republican at the time. And so threats, people, congressmen, the leaders of this country running for cover. It was a very disturbing day that we all remember. And this should have been kind of a unity and amalgamation of saying, look, whatever the reasons, let's just say this is not going to happen again. Well, it wasn't like that at all. We had the confrontations here. We had a service at the state capitol. No Republican attended outside of Representative Cheney, who's the daughter of the former Vice President Dick Cheney, and he came. Just the two of them were there, the only Republicans, in a day that's not supposed to be a confrontational day. It's a day of some mourning and reflection and looking back to say this was not going to happen again. That's what we did with 9/11. That's what we've done in New Orleans with Katrina and other tragedies we've had in our state. That's how you do things. That's how a democracy, people that mean well, do things. On the other hand, it was highly politicized by the president. He came out and strongly attacked, not by name, but talking about the ex-president, Donald Trump. So both sides played it to the hilt, Steve, if you will, and we left with a bad taste in our mouth saying, look, this is more of the division we're having in this country. It should have been a day of kind of, yes, looking back, but saying, it should have been an acknowledgement that, look, the threat to democracy is not in Afghanistan or Iraq or other worldwide confrontations. In this day and age, it's right here at home. We've seen that with these bombers and these shooters who are domestic terrorists, is what they are, who've done a lot of killing in our schools and shopping malls and that kind of thing. So we've got a threat to democracy that's internal. And what happened in Washington on January the 6th of last year was internal. Mm-hmm. And that should be acknowledged to say that we're going to try to unify and put this together, and it wasn't doing it. So, Steve, the conclusion is it's the same old, Republicans grandstanding, Democrats pushing way too hard and no unity. And quite frankly, I think it was a disappointing day for democracy, quite frankly.
Okay. I appreciate that. I really do. I have some of the same thoughts, but I do want to hear from those people who are watching. Please go ahead and make your comments. Do you agree with Jim on that issue? Do you disagree with him? How do you feel about what happened yesterday? So I'd love to hear from you. Just go ahead and make your comments below, and let's see. How do you feel? Did the president start it off on a bad note? Um, should should the Republicans in Congress have been present, um, at least at the very minimum, to show respect to the police who were battered. A bunch of them have PTSD. 5 committed suicide after this event. I mean, this was a really serious thing. So let's see. I do have um, from. Let me put this up. James Harold Lacombe Jr. say that he. Good morning, guys. Just joining. So please make a comment. We want to hear from you. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can play this video for a second. Bear with me. I'm going to try to get out of this program real quick. I'm trying to do too much with this. Okay, so I can't do that quite yet.
Steve, I can
Yeah,
elaborate a bit more while you're trying to do that. I think there's also some things that, what both sides should have said is, look, we have some security problems in this nation today, and they're long range problems. We've got to find a better way to defend and get more information. We've got a CIA that all over the world gathers massive information through satellite and through the internet that apparently does a pretty good job of giving us information as to what's happening. Internally, that's just not the case. Steve, you go back to 9/11, I mentioned. You go back to the Boston bomb event, and you go back to what happened last year. There was credible information these things were going to happen. With the Boston bomber, the Russians on 2 different occasions called and said, watch these guys, they're terrible. You got to do something. Nothing happened. 9/11, we had information that there may be use of planes to cause chaos. Came out of the Minneapolis FBI office. Nothing happened. And last year, there has been numerous reports of federal officers, the FBI primarily, who had credible information but didn't convey it. So the Capitol Police really weren't prepared for this onslaught, and that's something that we seem to be glossing over. That we after this happened on January the 6th of last year, National Guardsmen by the truckloads came in and huge fences put up. Well, that's all gone now, but there are continuing threats. These are big scale threats that are well planned. And for some reason, we just aren't getting the domestic information together like we seem to get the worldwide information. Like I say, the CIA were on the national, international level, with some exceptions, Iraq being one of them, seem to do a pretty good job of gathering. Internally, the Justice Department, the FBI, our various internal agencies seem to have really dropped the ball, yet we're not focusing on that. We're just using the politics where we beat up on the former president and accuse this president of not doing enough and saying, look, we got to find a way to straighten this thing out. The Wall Street Journal called for the abolition of the FBI and a complete restructuring a couple of months ago. And yet no one's picking up on a lack of credible information. So we're posturing Republican and Democrat, but in terms of really solving the problem, it seems like we're very weak in that kind of response, Steve.
Okay, so I'm going to play this video. 1 second, please.
None of them died. They're still around. But again, who cares? It's not about body counts. It's about feelings. It's about how the survivors feel, especially the reporters who survived. The feelings of reporters in Washington matter a great deal in America. They certainly matter a lot more than how you feel at the moment. How you feel, as you probably noticed by this point, is totally irrelevant to anyone. Nobody cares. None of them died. They're still around. But again, who cares?
So you heard it. Tucker Carlson said that nobody cares. I mean, I got it. I'll respond after your response.
Well, I've followed Carlson over the years and seen his transformation from becoming a pretty interesting guy with a sense of humor who keeps a pretty solid middle of the road view to moving very firmly to the right. And I'm disappointed. I've met him on several occasions. I've got his cell phone number, Steve, so I ought to call him and put him on the air here with us right now. And I like some of the things he says, but he's gone way overboard on this where nobody cares. Of course we care. I mean, we've got to get on with our lives. We care about COVID, but we still have to get on with our lives. In the interim, though, the leadership that should be caring in a way that is productive is just not doing it. I saw the Republican congressman on television on CNN last night from Mississippi, who heads up the full investigation. And we're going to work on this for months and years and no definitives, not saying, hey, one, we've got to get better information from our law enforcement agencies. Number two, we've got to beef up security in the Capitol. Number three, we've got to tone down the rhetoric. Didn't say that. It just was so partisan. And so Tucker, unfortunately, is playing into that partisanship. And it really is disappointing as just a citizen. I'm not in public office anymore, but just as a citizen of my state and of my country, I just wish there was more in terms of solutions. We can beat up on what happened, but let's get solution oriented. And quite frankly, we're just not doing it, Steve.
Okay, so let me post from Tim Matthews. Let me just preface it by saying that Tim is a very thoughtful conservative. He and I have gone head to head on different issues, but I really respect what he has to say. So let me put it up. Tucker is correct. I heard a report today that in Zoom meetings in Wisconsin, they must wear masks. What Tucker is saying that no one cares about is the low death rate or high COVID rate, even in vaccinated. The entire point is being missed. Nobody cares, meaning nobody cares about COVID, and nobody cares about this. I'm not sure I fully understand what Tim Matthews is saying. Jim.
Well, I think he's talking about intervention in terms of government putting a mask mandate. He's saying you got to wear a mask during a Zoom meeting. I don't know where that's coming from. That doesn't seem logical. Tucker, I'm not questioning you, but why would you wear a mask during a Zoom meeting? We're in effect Zooming here right now. I guess I could put my mask on for show, but I don't see the point of doing that. Apparently, Tucker is talking about government overreach. Let me tell you what I think, my personal view on this. I don't care what you do with your life. You don't have to wear a helmet when you ride a motorcycle. You don't have to wear a mask when you go out. As long as you don't get in my face, stay out of my face. If you've got possibly susceptible to the COVID and you're right there by me, you darn right you ought to wear a mask. If you're riding a motorcycle, darn right you should wear a helmet, unless you're going to take care of your own medical expenses when you run into a tree and crack your head open. So just stay out of my face. I don't think, I think what Tucker is saying, government shouldn't impede.
Tim, actually it's Tim. Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, it's Tim. Yeah, Tim. But Tim, don't say your freedom allows you to get into my face and cause me damage. Look, I had the COVID. I was hospitalized for 2 weeks. My brother-in-law at the same time got it and died of the COVID. So you're walking on a pretty tough line. This is not just a philosophical discussion for me. This hits home to me. It took me 6 months to recover. So stay out of my face. Live your life.
And you still have some overlay, am I correct?
The what now?
You still have overlay.
Of the COVID?
Yeah.
Yeah, I going when I leave here. Number one, I got my booster shot about an hour ago today, Steve. When I leave this show, I'm going to the physical therapist to do a real good, solid hour of work, and I've had the COVID a year ago. So, but
That's
anyway,
amazing.
uh,
Yeah.
that's somewhat related, Tim. But I'm just saying, when you want to get into this stuff, uh, Zooms with a mask sounds ridiculous, but just don't infringe on my freedom when you want to insist on your freedom. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Okay, so let's focus on January 6th. Go back to that, I should say, and to at least let me just give my thoughts about Tucker Carlson, his comment. Again, what he said. Let me just for those people who just signed on, Tucker Carlson saying that nobody cares about January 6th. So, I mean, really what he's saying is that one, nobody cares about, the hundreds of police that were beaten up. Many of them still have PTSD. The five who committed suicide, nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about lies that were propagated and are still being propagated by a loser. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares that there was what appears to be a conspiracy of people from all from across the nation as well as in the White House. Not necessarily. Let me just be real clear. Not necessarily to actually coordinate the riot, but a conspiracy in trying to do away with the certification. Nobody cares about that. I mean, that's beyond, in my mind at least. I just don't understand that. Thoughts?
Well, I don't think that this riot at the Capitol touched home to so many average citizens like other events. 9/11, for example, we were totally mesmerized. 3,000 people killed, thousands affected by lung disease, that kind of thing. So it was a massive attack on America that really hit home, and so that was a little different. Boston bombers, same thing. What, 20 some odd people killed, many injured, where a bomb goes off in a parade. That hits home, where the Capitol riots may not be as intense at hitting home, but I don't agree with Tucker in terms of saying nobody cares. Of course we care. We want to be able to take our kids to the U.S. Capitol, know we're safe. We want our members of Congress to go up there and legislate and work together. That's what the average person wants, I think. And yet, and so, yes, there is the caring, but maybe not the intense personal tie that it had to events like 9/11. Kamala Harris, the vice president, said that January the 6th is going to go down in history as a defining event, just like 9/11. I think what Tucker exaggerated a bit, but I think what he's saying is, no, it's not going to go down as that kind of event to the average American. It will not get the history book notations to the degree that 9/11 will. He's the pendulum is swinging for Tucker in one direction, and I think he believes that. He just went a little too far, quite frankly, Steve.
Okay.
He's an entertainer. It's entertainment, and he's playing to his crowd, and he's good at it. Quite frankly, he's good at it. But
Okay. So
we do
go
care.
go ahead.
We do care.
Okay, so I'm going to put up some tweets that I came across last night. Bear with me. Let's see. I need to. I must have hit the wrong one. Let me. Okay. So this is on the line of the same subject, which is says actually I'm bored by it all. This is the sheriff David Clark, and he says that he's bored by it all. Can we move on? He says, and this has a little local appeal. Steve Scalise getting shot by a Bernie Sanders supporter was much bigger deal and assault on American democracy. Why don't Biden, Pelosi, Schumer commemorate that? Don't act like January 6th was 9/11. Um, I don't want you. This is along the same lines of what we talked about. Do you have any comments? I'd like to go to the next one.
Well, no, Steve, I think that obviously, and we were very touched by Steve Scalise being right down here. I've served with Steve Scalise and consider him a close personal friend. But I mean, he didn't commemorate it. Nobody around him commemorated. It was one terrible event of an attack on a member of our Congress. But it's not viewed on as attack on democracy. I think it's one more event in what I've been saying all along, that we're more worried about the attacks from around the world rather than the attacks from within. What happened to Steve Scalise was terrible, and it just piles on why we're not doing enough. The failure of our Justice Department, the failure of the FBI. So we're not diminishing what happened to Steve Scalise, but again, a lot of this is perception for what you see. Steve's shooting did not take place on national television. That January the 6th did, and pleadings were coming in from people while we were watching that, from Donald Trump's daughter and from his son, from Sean Hannity, from the Speaker of the House, from Mitch McConnell, who head of the Senate at that particular time, saying, you got to do something, you got to do something. We were watching this unfold step by step. And so that hits home to the national psyche more than, say, an isolated event of the shooting. Shooting is terrible, and my heart goes out to one of the most tremendous recoveries. I'm a huge fan of the emotion and commitment to Steve Scalise, but it didn't happen on national or worldwide television like January the 6th did, Steve.
Okay, now we're being watched right now on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook. Extraordinary technology. One more comment I want to put up. Again, if anybody has a comment, this is Tim Matthews again, Tim Allen Matthews. If you take your kids to a highly political event where people are unhappy, then do you really care? Your children are safe today at the Capitol. Same applies on certain streets during Mardi Gras. Jim?
Well, I'm not sure about what Tim means by, your kids are safe. Look, your kids are not safe on Canal Street in downtown New Orleans, in the French Quarter. Used to be, the rule was, remember what your mama said, nothing good happens after midnight. Well, now the shootings are taking place in the middle of the day. So that applies to a whole way of life today. In terms of you're looking after your kids. If my grandkid, I'm picking two of them up from school today, is out of my eyesight or even 20 feet away from me, I throw my hands up and come here, get here. And I don't know the exact threat, but there are so many threats that take place that I'm much more overprotected today than parents were 15, 20 years ago. So, so as I say, I think in America today, you keep your guard up no matter where you are, Steve. We've just seen that time and time. It's not just the Capitol, Mardi Gras, whatever. So, I think what Tim has just put a comment up about at highly political events where the tension rises. You're right. I mean, I wouldn't want my kid. I wouldn't like any of my family being in Charlottesville, Virginia, or some of the events that took place down in Georgia. Obviously, at the Capitol, no, you shouldn't take your kids to those kinds of events, even if you want to educate them. This day and time just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and that's his point, I think, as he posts. Let me put this up real quick since we were talking about Steve Scalise. Okay, and what Steve is saying here, this is a tweet from yesterday morning that I thought was really interesting. He says the people who broke into the Capitol on January 6th all got arrested. Why not the people who burned down cities and police stations last summer? I know that that's I think a real issue. I'd like to address that if you don't mind, and then Jim, please feel free to jump in. Um, they have been arrested. A lot of them were arrested by the state police, and because they were state crimes. So I think the number I saw were something like 1,500. I could be wrong, but there it's not like these people who rioted or who looted. I mean, which was horrible and which should have been condemned by Democrats largely, and which weren't, which I think was horrible. Um, at the time that it happened. So the thing is that uh, for Scalise, in my mind, to compare this situation, we're talking about. Let me just say this: we're talking about a president of the United States who was watching this unfold, even if he had nothing to do with the riot itself. He watched it, and he did nothing. And people were calling for him, and he did nothing. And they were begging him, and he did nothing. That's what January 6th was about. It wasn't just about the police who got beat up. It wasn't just about the vice president who got threatened with the noose, so to speak. It really was, and I think that's why Biden started off, although I wish that he would have toned it down. It was the fact that the president of the United States, who is declaring that the election was a fraud, was just watching police get beaten up. Go ahead.
Well, Steve, Tim, who is watching us here right now, say that, can you explain how Trump is at fault of, or actually incited violence? I think that, Tim, that's not the point we're talking about, that there's no proof that there was any planning that the president knew about or his inner circle was involved in any way, and I don't believe they were. I think what Steve's here is making, the point he's making, and I agree, that while the president sat there and watched every close advisor around him, almost without exception, his two children that spend all this time with him, Sean Hannity, who his close friend who's on Fox News every night, his chief of staff saying, Mr. President, walk the few steps down to the press room and call for calm and say, this is not acceptable. We're not going to allow this violence. I'm immediately calling in the National Guard. I'm not going to sit here in America's capital and allow this to take place. So it's not so much that he was part of the planning, Tim. I think it was more in line with the fact that he could have taken some action that hopefully could have mitigated and toned down the rhetoric and didn't do it. That's what the charge is. And look, Mitch McConnell went on the floor of the U.S. Senate and said this very thing. Lindsey Graham, who's a big Trump supporter, senator from South Carolina, said that very clearly, and a number of Republicans have done that. So, in any event, I think that the smurge on the ex-president is he could have taken some action and didn't do so. And maybe he just didn't in his mind think that it was going to blow up like it was, but at some point in time, most close observers felt the president should have taken action, and he didn't do so.
Okay, so if you have a question, please go. If you want to make a comment, please go ahead and do so. Those watching, please share. Those people who are watching afterwards, please go ahead and share and make your comment, and we'll try to reply to your comment after. We have a few more minutes and wanted to keep this down to about a half hour. Again, this is being broadcasted on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on numerous platforms right now. And let's see, let me take this from James Harold Lacombe Jr. In regards to security, I feel there has to be better protocols in place. You never diminish all the probable threats because someone with this type of motivation will not be stopped. We have to be responsible for our actions, no blame game. No question about that. Jim?
Yeah, I think James Lacombe is right on. That's the whole point that I was trying to make when they opened up. And James, I couldn't agree with you more. Uh, what can we do to protect something? The place where all the laws of this country take place, the very location where we decide whether we go to war or not. Every American is affected by what happens in the nation's capital. It's a sacred place, if you will, and yet it was infiltrated right into very bowels of the Capitol, where notes were written on the desk of the Speaker and the Senate, and they were looking for the Vice President to hang him, according to some of the rioters. So my point is, we deserve better as a American citizen. We deserve better, and we got shortchanged there. And so, rather than sitting and blaming for months to come, let's say, look, let's put a plan together where this kind of thing never happens again. And that's the point that James is making, and I certainly agree with that, Steve.
Okay, let me just put up this again. Tim says at what point do Americans get a voice or protest against? I don't think the protesters wanted violence proven by video evidence. I think there's another factor. There is another factor. Trump was calling for peace. Two comments, if I might. Number one is I think it's wrong for people to say or to suggest that the people who went there wanted violence. I think the vast majority of those people who went there, the thousands of people who went there out of protest. I think they were misled by the President of the United States. But they went there to protest, and they didn't have anything to do whatsoever with the riots. However, Trump calling for peace, saying, as I mentioned to Tim the other day on Facebook, that's like having the SS from the Nazis tell people as they go into the say the gas chambers, have be careful or whatever it may be, have a good time. I mean, when you are screaming at the top of your lungs, our country is going. This is our last chance. Our country is going. Our democracy is no longer going to be there. You have speakers before him basically say the same thing, and you have just two words: "Go peacefully." Um, that is. I mean, that's absurd. Anybody with any sense is going to say "Go peaceful" after saying, "Hey, our country is falling apart. We're all going to die." I mean, anyway, that's just my thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, Steve, if the president, right in the middle of all said, called me, and I believe you, and said, look, the riots are taking place, it's gotten out of control, what would you advise me to do? I say, Mr. President, you have a tremendous opportunity to, in effect, put you back in the good graces of all Americans. Go down there to your press room and say, look, I think that there are election irregularities that should be investigated. And I think that I don't like the way it was handled. But this is unacceptable to have the violence. Look, this does not help our country. In spite of the fact that I lost this election, and I highly disagree with the current president or the president that's taking over, I love my country, and I want to bring peaceful solutions. I want to make democracy work. He would have gone out in real class and real style. And I think now maybe he felt like that wasn't playing to his base, or he just didn't think that at all under the circumstances. But I think he missed a great opportunity to assert himself and give a better leadership face on him, if you will. And he decided not to do it. It's not a question. He just kind of sat back and didn't do anything. And that's the knock, and that's a legitimate knock. And so I think he missed a great opportunity, Steve.
I'll say this, that we saw what seems to be a wonderful police officer with over 20 years of experience who was negligent in shooting rather than using a taser, and get could be 20 or 30 years in jail, versus a president of the United States do nothing while people are being beaten up. That's profound to me. Again, let me just say this. Going forward, and we'll come to the end, and please, people, go ahead and share and make your comments afterwards. Um, what would you like, Jim? What would you like for President Biden to do at this point in time, now that it's January 7th and he got his emotions out? Um, he got his chance to punch Trump in the nose and get punched back. Um, so, where do we go from here? Where do we go so that we can assure democracy rather than what some people are concerned about, some kind of civil uh, redress,
Well,
uncivil redress.
several comments. First of all, and some of the Republicans or more conservatives may disagree with me, but I think the president showed some pizzazz and some strength that he's been criticized for not having before yesterday. He looks in strongly. If he'd been taking on the Russians, America would have said, what a tremendous speech that he made. He was strong, he was forceful, he got angry at the right times. He looked presidential, quite frankly, where he's been accused in the past of kind of dozing off or not being focused at all, glassy eyed. So I think it was a good moment for the president, number one. Number two, I think what he should say, Steve, is look, the conflicts still remain, and we've got to put this behind us, number one, but we've got to be secure, number two. I am urging members of the Congress to bring this investigation to a close. Let number one, and those who have been charged ought to be or arrested should be charged. We don't want this to happen again. And by the way, that's gone very slowly, Steve, within the federal court system. 700 people I've read have actually been arrested, and of those arrested, only 30 have been prosecuted and convicted, and or the prosecutors are calling for some very strict sentences. A number of federal judges are giving them slaps of whip. They're not doing much. But in any event,
Actually, the judges are angry, with the prosecutors for allowing misdemeanors instead of felonies. So, some of the judges on both sides, Republican and Democrat appointed judges, they're angry about this, I believe. Go ahead.
well, the last point I was going to make was
Yeah.
that I think the president ought to say very forcefully, this will not happen again. As long as I'm president, I'll never allow attacks to be on the nation's capital in the way that this was done. And we're going to beef up security. We're going to train our officers better. We're going to, the electronic security systems you could put in today, the Capitol is about as effective as it was 100 years ago. And then number two, I'm going to direct immediately, I'm going to call in the head of the FBI, the Justice Department, and say, what can we do to anticipate these events? You didn't do it last time, fellas. We've got to do it in the future, and I'm going to insist that we do so. So there's some very aggressive presidential statements and actions that President Biden can take, and I hope he'll do so. Because again, we all agree what happened was unacceptable, whatever the reasons. And number two, we want to be, we don't want to be Monday morning quarterbacks, but we sure got to have a plan in place not to ever let it happen again.
So I'll follow with that in last question. What I'd like for President Biden to do, and President Biden, if you're listening,
and I'm sure he is. I'm sure President Trump and President Biden are both listening.
That's right. So what I think that President Biden ought to do is this: he ought to bring McConnell and McCarthy into the Oval Office, and he ought to sit down with them and just say, "Listen, guys, we got a real problem here. And if we are going to make this into a Democrat versus Republican thing, then we're all going to lose. All of us are going to lose. I think that he ought to recommend, forcefully recommend, that an investigation be done in Congress by Democratic Congress to start it and see what happens in November or January next year in terms of the riots. I think that you need to. I mean, there's a legitimate concern about. I'm talking about the riots from the last summer. There's legitimate concerns that Tim raised that, and others have, of course, raised that the riots were controlled by some outside forces. If so, then I think that no question that needs to be determined. If not, if not, then that needs to be determined also. Lastly, I think that what needs to be understood is this: that the Republicans had a chance to put together a 9/11 type commission. They refused to do that. They refused to do so. And so consequently, they had to go with this quote select committee. And McCarthy goes and he brings in 5 people, 2 of them who are just absolutely are going to share information with the president himself. So, but Pelosi allowed 3 of them, and McCarthy just said, no, I'm not going to allow this. So that's become very political. I think Biden has got to do whatever he can do to bring this together so that it is not political, that is broad based, and whatever the findings are, the findings are. Jim, you had the last word.
Well, that's the challenge to the president, and I agree with you. I don't care how popular or unpopular you are. When you're there in the Oval Office, you have tremendous sway in terms of what you say. And so, again, if I were the president, I wouldn't let the whole thing be done by a partisan commission where the Democrats are fighting with the Republicans or challenging the Democrats. Put a presidential commission together. After Kennedy was assassinated, this was not a congressional investigation. Lyndon Johnson put a presidential commission together to investigate the Kennedy assassination. That's another story, by the way. I'm not sure they got it right. But in any event, Steve, you're right on the money. Biden needs to show the leadership of bringing everyone together. And if you talk about the future, we can't let this happen again. We've got to beef up security and take that role. He's going to look good in doing so. But I also think the Republicans will say, look, you're right, Mr. President. This is never going to happen again. And I think Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, the other Republican leaders you mentioned, have a great opportunity to show some positive pizzazz that will help them as the next election cycle comes around. So that's the challenge. And I'm sure they heard it first right here on Bayou Buzz in this video call, but I hope they'll follow it, Steve. And hopefully we can do some follow-up sharing and talk about it again. And thanks for having me on. And Steve, by the way, I'm writing a lot about this very thing. You can go to my website, which is simply jimbrownla.com. That's jimbrownla.com. I look forward to doing some more with you, Steve.
Okay, let me read Michael McHale. He says, to me, the biggest factor is that January 6th was predicated on a lie. The president knew the election wasn't stolen, yet he pushed the big lie to incite his followers. He was trying to overturn a legitimate election. If you disagree with me, please point out. And let me just bring in this one from Tim Allen Williams. I have a hard time believing it will never be Dems versus Republican. We're just too divided on such beliefs. Tim, I have to agree with you there. And that's why I'm imploring that President Biden get behind this and try to bring the parties together. Because, I fear, for the future of the country. And as I've stated many times. Listen, thank you so much. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, James, Mike, everybody else. Please go ahead and share. And I'm going to be putting up parts of the this in snippets and put it up on Bayou Buzz and elsewhere. Thank you again. Jim, please hang on for a second if you can, and I'm going to end this stream. Thank you again. Bye-bye.